Welcome to the Quakers Then and Now exhibit here at Wellington Heritage Museum. Wellington Heritage Museum is a former Quaker meeting house built in 1885. And of course, the Quakers were a very dominant religious group here in Prince Edward County throughout most of the 19th century. We wanted to do an exhibit that would really bring a focus to the history of Quakerism, but the history of Quakers in Prince Edward County specifically. So this exhibit that we're going to be showing you today really brings that to life. We were approached by a number of practicing Quakers in our community about putting on a display of Quaker artifacts and Quaker history that was a little bit more fulsome than what we offer normally. And so we decided to start the exhibit with a number of panels that have been contributed by the Canadian Friends Historical Association. You can actually find most of this information online. Now these panels, they outline the history of Quakerism, the religion more generally. So not specifically to Prince Edward County, but talking about Quakerism's origins in the 1600s in England, and then about how Quakers were expelled from Britain and came over to the 13 colonies in North America. And then, of course, how after the American Revolution, a lot of Quakers found themselves in need of a new home because of their neutrality during the American Revolution. And so that's when they found their way up to British North America, what is now known as Canada. After introducing the history of Quakerism more generally, we wanted to really focus on the history of Quakers in Prince Edward County and bring to light a lot of the objects and histories that we contain in our collection, including the story of Rufus Garrett, who was a local Quaker minister and whose coat, jacket, and Bible you can see here. When Quakers first arrived in Prince Edward County in the 1790s, paid ministers were not the norm. However, by the time of Rufus's tenure here at the Wellington Meeting House in the 1930s, that was how Quakers were choosing to worship. There are a number of core pillars or testimonies that Quakers ascribe to. And these include testimonies related to peacefulness, truthfulness, and equality, as well as living one's life simply. Early Quaker meetings involved the parishioners, or the members of the meeting, sitting in a circle like this often, or facing one another, and would have involved quiet, introspective worship. It wasn't about a minister delivering a sermon, it was about looking inside oneself to find God and his teachings. Westlake Boarding School, located on Highway 33 between Bloomfield and Picton, was the first Quaker seminary or boarding school opened in Canada, which is a testament to how many Quakers were living here in Prince Edward County. We have a number of items in our collection associated with the school, including this quilt, which was made by girls attending the school in the 1850s, as well as a class photograph of the class of 1862. With so many Quakers ending up here in Prince Edward County after the American Revolutionary War, you can imagine that as time went on, there were schisms as different groups decided they wanted to worship in different ways. Some groups deciding they wanted to leave the quiet, introspective ways of worship behind and move to a more evangelical way of attending church, not meeting. After a number of breaks in the Quaker Church in the 1820s and then again in the 1880s, multiple meeting houses had to be built in the county to accommodate these different groups. The meeting house that I am currently standing in, that was built in 1885, was actually the last and most modern meeting house to be built in the county. We've included two beautiful 1860s era dresses in the exhibit. These dresses, while not worn by a Quaker, are representative of the types of clothing that women in this meeting house would have been wearing, because at that point, they had abandoned the plain dress of generations before and had adopted more common ways of dress. Because Quakers valued equality, women always had an important part to play in Quaker society. We decided to highlight a number of women in our exhibit that were important here in Prince Edward County's society, including Rachel Bowerman Cronkite and Eliza Varney, who herself was a Quaker minister. We wanted to make sure to include some information in the exhibit on the unique ways that Quakers celebrate both marriages and funerals, but also the interesting committees that Quakers form, including the Clearness Committee and the Committee of Care, to help fellow Quakers in need. A number of objects in this part of the exhibit include the beautiful 1882 wedding dress of Caroline Elizabeth Bowerman, and also the early 1990s wedding certificate of Spencer Brennan and Larry Taylor. The number of Quakers in North America has declined significantly in the last half century. However, the religion is still alive and well. And the majority of Quakers in Canada these days actually practice the religion more in line with Quakerism as it was intended. Those core testimonies that we mentioned earlier, focusing on peacefulness, integrity, simplicity, etc., are still being followed to this day. And certainly this building, the Wellington Heritage Museum's connection to Quakerism and its Quaker history, will always be celebrated.